celebrating 45 years on the air. Award-winning Farm Week is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, swine fever literally on the radar, 1,000 miles from the U.S. Plus 2 familiar faux beef companies now in the chicken business. Also, more of what's being funded in that giant spending package. Plus, what to do during a gardening rain delay. An update on that Phase 1 China trade deal. And one last chance to meet the outgoing tree farmer of the year. Farm Week starts right now. Hello everybody, I'm Mike Russell. Thanks for joining us today here on Farm Week. Those in America's pork industry wary of African swine fever may have more of a reason for concern now that the virus seems to be moving closer to the U.S. If so, it would be a bigger threat to the industry on multiple levels. Peter Tubbs has the story.
The American pork industry is on heightened alert for signs of a notorious pig disease. The recent announcement that African swine fever has been discovered in both the Dominican Republic and Haiti has raised concerns that the pig disease could find its way to the United States.
ASF, classical swine fever, African swine fever, and foot and mouth disease all can be transmitted through product that's contaminated with the virus. And so the way that we've seen it spread to the majority of countries has been through the feeding of garbage with meat-containing plate waste that's got the virus in it.
While the virus cannot spread to humans, it has a 100% mortality rate in hogs. Both the USDA and customs officials have increased inspections of both pork entering the United States and travel checks of people entering the country from ASF hotspots. The habits of human handlers will mitigate the spread of the virus to new populations of pigs.
The way it spreads is through bad biosecurity decisions. It's really a human spread issue. ASF really doesn't have an aerosol component like foot and mouth disease would. And so it's people moving pigs that are sick or exposed, people who are feeding garbage. You know, those are the bad biosecurity decisions that move things around.
While the federal government focuses on preventing the spread of African swine fever, hog producers in the United States should review their operations and procedures to prepare for an outbreak in the country.
Our producers have biosecurity plans. And so first step, go review that plan, ensure compliance, focus on those things that are important to keeping diseases off the farm. And then it's really the focus on biosecurity and awareness. Make sure that you know that your biosecurity plan is strong, and if you find weaknesses in it, improve.
Back in 2019, the World Pork Expo was called off in Iowa to limit transmission opportunities. Iowa is #1 in U.S. pork production with more than 5,400 pig farms. When the World Pork Expo returned in the summer of 2021, ASF was a topic of conversation among attendees and industry leadership. Chinese farmers were dealing with the ASF virus in 2018 and another round in 2021. Back in the U.S., 60,000 hog producers will need to evaluate their procedures to protect the nation's 75 million hogs. The USDA announced this week a commitment of $500 million to prevent African swine fever in the U.S. Some of the money announced will aid research efforts at a vaccine.
And the industry has been very, very supportive of the work that USDA and Customs and Border Protection are doing currently to really double down on efforts to prevent it from getting to U.S. soil.
In other news, given the popularity of chicken these days, it's not surprising that 2 familiar faux meat names have moved into the poultry business. Impossible, you say? Beyond belief? Exactly. John Torpy has that story.
Rival California plant-based food startups Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods hope the same formula used to make their beef products a success will work on a new line of chicken products as well. On Monday, Beyond Meat said its new chicken tenders will go on sale in U.S. grocery stores in October. Meanwhile, Impossible Foods began selling its new chicken nuggets in September with plans to be in 10,000 stores by later this year.
We're launching Impossible Chicken Nuggets. Chicken is one of the most consumed categories of meats in the U.S., especially among children. We're launching a product that is delicious, more nutritious for you, lower saturated fat, fewer calories, and has far less impact on the environment.
Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods entered the plant-based meat market with different alternatives to ground beef. Beyond Meat burgers were the first to be sold in grocery stores in 2016. Impossible Burgers joined them a few years later. But the new chicken products will have more competition as they join freezer shelves already packed with plant-based chicken options. According to the Good Food Institute, a nonprofit organization promoting alternatives to conventional meat products, the plant-based meat market grew by more than $430 million between 2019 and 2020.
If you are one of these companies that are going into this with the hope and the mission of we are going to reduce human consumption of animals, we're going to reduce animal slaughter, then you have to address chickens because, billions of chickens are eaten. Chicken eating around the world is enormous.
Globally, retail sales of meat substitutes are expected to grow 2% to just over 4 million metric tons between 2021 and 2022, according to Euromonitor, an independent market research provider. Processed animal meat sales are expected to stay flat in the same period, at almost 19 million metric tons. According to Rees, plant-based meat sales were growing before the coronavirus pandemic, as more brands appeared on the market. But the pandemic gave plant-based meat a boost, as coronavirus outbreaks at meat processing plants led some consumers to add plant-based meat to their shopping carts for the first time.
In terms of the number of brands and the number of companies, we're still very much in the fighting out phase for a slice of the pie. And the pie is, the opportunity is huge and it's there.
At this point, it's pure speculation. How much of what's in that $3.5 trillion spending package will remain when or if it's finally passed? But a House Ag Subcommittee made a pitch for a number of projects. Josh Pittner has more.
The fires are terrifying, and I stand ready to do whatever I can as chair of this subcommittee to ensure that the Forest Service has the resources, the personnel, and the tools they need to prepare for future fires and respond to the wildland fires already raging.
This week, as an unprecedented 60 wildfires scorched 3 million acres in mostly western states, the U.S. House Agriculture Subcommittee pushed their section of the proposed Build Back Better Act, currently wrangling its way through Congress.
Wildfire is an emergency that we can wait no longer to address.
The bill contains nearly $75 billion for environmental hazard and fuel mitigation, post-fire recovery plans, removes caps on reforestation funding, invests in conservation and clean energy jobs, would create a civilian climate corps, and improve conditions for those on the front lines.
Federal wages of firefighters have not kept pace with states. I've listened to stories of firefighters sleeping in their cars or neglecting their medical bills. We must work to improve pay and give them a livable wage.
Amidst an historic burn season, forecasts and current conditions favor more of the same. The University of Nebraska's U.S. Drought Monitor reveals most of the American West gripped by extreme conditions. And a report released this week by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Drought Task Force found exceptional drought in the Southwest has been exacerbated by human-driven global warming. NOAA added last year up to $23 billion in economic losses, including wildfire damages and massive water shortages, could be attributed to drought, which especially imperils the 60 million people in states which share the Colorado River, where a 2-decade warm and dry period has baked the region.
In Southern gardening this week, what do you do when the weather gets in the way? Now, let's be clear about this. It sometimes gets in the way of both the gardener and our camera crews when we're filming the segment. Here's Gary Bachman with more insight.
Just like every gardener in the South, the crew of Southern Gardening also has to deal with the rain. So what do I do when I can't get in the garden because of the rain? I think about the plants I could be planting. Let's take a look at a few. Garden planting doesn't have to be hard. I like to use the same thriller, filler, and spiller container recipe for my landscape. Let me show you. Spiller plants are those ground cover types. Here are a couple great suggestions. Purslane is one of these plants that are perfect and forms a dense mat of drought-resistant color. And ornamental sweet potatoes are perfect for laying a gorgeous carpet of vivid and attractive leaves. These plants are vigorous and produce thick mats of color. Yep, it's still raining. Filler plants add body to the landscape planting. Colocaceae certainly fit the description of a filler plant. The leaves are huge with coarse texture and do fill in any open spaces in the landscape. And the coarse foliage of caladiums will fill any lower area with color. A wide variety can offer an explosion of colorful foliage. I'm always thrilled with the varieties of cutting zinnia. These are big plants that add excitement. With the range of colors including white, pink, yellow, and purples, these are perfect for cutting to be enjoyed indoors. And to put a positive spin on a gardening rain delay, it gives you time for Garden Planning 101. Oops, time to go. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman. I hope you'll see me next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up on our Farm Week feature, one last chance to meet the 2020 Tree Farmer of the Year. Like a lot of folks in the tree business, this year's winner has been at it for a long time. The land's been in his family since the 40s. He came home to help the family after leaving the military in the 60s. He's been at it ever since. There's much more to the story, though, and you'll see all of it coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
In Extension, we work hard to make sure that we're providing the best science-based education to our clients because we know that you need answers and solutions that you can rely on. It's natural to have questions, and it's important to be able to turn to experts that you can trust. I trust experts myself for the health of my family's cattle and crops, and for my health too. That's why I decided to get the COVID-19 vaccine as soon as it was available to me. I want to protect myself, my family, and my neighbors from this devastating disease. And I want to get back to all of the happy times together that we have missed. So get the facts you need and get the vaccine. Let's all get back to the people we love and the activities we enjoy.
Hi, I'm David Buys.
And I'm Katie Buys.
We know how important it is to take your health questions to experts you can trust,
who offer answers based on science.
The science shows that the COVID vaccine is safe and effective at preventing the disease. Hundreds of millions of people have received the vaccine so far with very few side effects.
But choosing to delay getting the vaccine increases the chance that COVID will spread. When it spreads, it mutates or develops variants. And we're seeing that variants can be even more dangerous than the original virus.
Getting the vaccine is a personal decision, and when you choose to get it, you're protecting yourself, your family, and your neighbors. You're also protecting the most vulnerable people who can't take the vaccine. People being treated for cancer or organ transplants, people with serious illnesses, and small children. So get the answers you need.
And get the vaccine.
You'll be a hero.
Time for the markets with Zach Ashmore. A lot happening this week, and Zach, as usual, has it all. Zach?
Thanks, Mike. Last week's markets closed fairly mixed with row crops down. Can't say we didn't see that one coming. However, lumber, cattle, and cotton all up. Let's take a look. Last week's biggest loss, wheat down 21.25 cents. Looks like its push has stalled, but it may not be for long. Price is still pretty high. Last week's biggest gain, lumber up about $98, followed by cotton at about 6 cents. So let's look at an issue we haven't talked about in a while, the Phase 1 trade deal. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, China's 30% behind pace. Why? Well, Farm Week reporter Jonah Holland has the story.
We continue to have serious concerns with China's state-centered and non-market trade practices that were not addressed in the Phase 1 deal. As we work to enforce the terms of Phase 1, we will raise these broader policy concerns with Beijing. And we will also directly engage with China on its industrial policies. Our objective is not to inflame trade tensions with China.
While the White House is monitoring China's commitment to the Phase 1 agreement negotiated by the last administration, it has already scrapped plans to negotiate a second deal. U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai said last week the U.S. will reduce tariffs in areas where China has met goals while maintaining them in areas under dispute. The administration is also promoting spending to improve the global trade competitiveness of the U.S., focusing on education and infrastructure.
Durable coexistence requires accountability and respect for the enormous consequences of our actions. I am committed to working through the many challenges ahead in this bilateral process in order to deliver meaningful results. But above all else, we must defend to the hilt our economic interests.
Reporting for Farm Week, I'm Jonah Holland.
Continuing on policy, last week the Biden administration increased funding to small and medium-sized meat processors to the tune of $100 million. The program now has $600 million. USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack spoke about it. Once again, John Torpy reports.
The goal here is obviously to strike a better balance between supply and demand, between processing capacity and competition, with greater transparency so that we can have a stable, dependent, and fair market.
USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack appeared before the House Agriculture Committee this week as part of a hearing to look at the state of the livestock and processing industry.
There's no question that we are short of capacity, which is one of the reasons why it's more difficult for farmers to get a fair price for what they're raising.
Over the past few months, Vilsack has continually called on Congress to revamp the rules of the Packers and Stockyards Act in order to level the playing field between producers and meat processors.
So you see,
Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa also testified before the committee, highlighting the lack of market transparency.
the reauthorization of the mandatory price reporting is the vehicle available where we can add additional price transparency and price discovery measures, and that's what I'm advocating.
Witnesses appearing before the committee point to consolidation among the largest beef processors has created an unbalanced market for producers.
But I will tell you this, from NCBA's standpoint, we don't want that money that you're giving out to go to the 4 large packers. They don't need any more money. We need that to go to the small producers and the medium-sized regional plants because they can make a difference for us.
Work stoppages at processing facilities brought on by the global pandemic exacerbated the existing bottleneck problems in the livestock processing industry. Producers were left waiting with livestock at the packing house door, causing a price decline for farmers and ranchers. Meanwhile, the cost for consumers climbed at the meat counter.
Between 1980 and 2020, the retailer's percentage of the beef food dollar has grown by 65%. And the packer share has increased even more by 70%. During this same time, the farmer and rancher share has fell by more than 40%. I ask you, how fair is this?
A representative for the North American Meat Institute countered, pointing out the fluid nature of the industry.
The cattle and beef industry is driven by supply and demand, and the cattle market is cyclical. Not long ago, the cattle market was the reverse of today. In 2013, 14, and 15, the herd was small, and producers were making record profit while packers were losing money.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. Lots of interesting things going on trade-wise. Markets responding to new info coming in what feels like a daily basis. The WASDE report dropped this week, and next week we'll look into that. Mike?
You're about to meet one last time the outgoing tree farmer of the year from 2020. He's a retired farmer and his family has owned the land for generations. In Prentiss County, Mississippi, Mr. David Hill. Here's Zach with his story.
Well, I originally was a livestock farmer and cattle and hogs, and but the last number of years I've set more of the pasture in trees, and actually I'm a full-time tree farmer now.
David Hill's family began tree farming in 1976.
Throughout that time, a slow transition from livestock to loblolly pine, overseen by David and his father, and assisted by forestry programs, have made him a success.
Well, I was raised on the land, and my father was a small farmer, row crop and dairy farmer at one time, and then in the 50s I used to go with him, and he'd cut a big oak log and carry it to the sawmill to get lumber, and then later on our extension, our 4-H club extension, had a tree planter, and I was about 14 or so. That was in probably 1959 or so, and then he took some 4-H clubbers out and we planted trees. And so that was kind of my first taste of planting pine trees, and I reckon it just hung with me.
It was his dedication to proper forest management that's made him this year's Mississippi Tree Farmer of the Year. Most of his family's former pasture and farmland now holds acres of beautiful, well-managed pine woods.
If you held on to the land, you had to make it produce. Since physically I got down and wasn't able to run cattle anymore, the trees were the next viable option. You know, used to, trees were just something that grew in the woods. Now you manage trees similar to what you would manage another crop, and that's certainly so with this tree farm.
Well, I began working with his father in 1984.
Helping Mr. Hill is Robbie Howell, consulting forester whose relationship with the Hill family goes back to the beginning of their journey transitioning to tree farming. He was there when David's father, the late Mr. Maurice Hill, along with his son, needed advice on getting started.
Well, David is he's easygoing. He's real level-headed, you know, and I think he's very environmentally conscientious. He's very concerned about the land use and try to do things in the right kind of way. The income on the property is important, but it's also important to David to see that the land is well cared for and the roads are properly maintained, and you know, he's willing to spend the extra effort and money to try to keep the family forest holdings in good shape, and not kind of a one-way street, you might say.
Of course, like I said, you got to realize I was raised in the woods, so to speak. I could walk about a mile behind my house and still be on my grandfather's land. So I mean, you know, land was a part of me when I was growing up. The type of land you have dictates kind of what you do, I think. We had a commissioner, Jim Buck Ross, at one time said that, and I agreed with him, said some land need to be growing trees, some need to be in pasture, and some need to be in row crop. And I certainly agree with him on that.
In addition to tree farming, Mr. Hill is also president of the Prentiss County Forestry Association and has retained that position since its beginning.
I was the only full-time tree farmer, and nobody else wanted it, so that by virtue, I've had it all these years, and I see about getting quality programs, and I work with our extension agent in Boonville, put these programs on.
Mr. Hill also credits the Extension Service for his success. He says it was invaluable to getting him started and on the right track.
I've been to different little seminars in Corinth and New Albany, and down at the North Mississippi Experiment Station, I attended a 7-week course by satellite from Clemson. So to learn, you need to take advantage of a lot of these courses that Extension can offer. But there's a lot of different programs like how to thin your pines, or how to do your taxes, you know, with timber taxes and stuff. So there's a whole big list of extension programs that can be taken.
The fact that we have a vehicle that will allow you to give some accolades to people who are doing a good job. I know it means a lot to David. It would have to his dad. And I think that that's a good thing that the forest community likes to recognize. And, you know, it is the landowner is the one who's out here exercising his will, you might say, over the property during his lifetime. And I think that if they, you know, are thinking that they have a little obligation that goes beyond their self, I think that's good.
All in all, the story of David Hill is that of a devoted farmer who made a prudent decision and followed through using proper techniques learned through experience and expert advice. He's overcome hardship, handicap, and a changing world, but in the end, his sound choices have ensured success.
Sweet story. Congratulations once again to Mr. Hill. Well, next week you'll meet the 2021 Tree Farmer of the Year. Zach heads to Hancock County, Mississippi, where we meet a steward of the land that's been in his family for 70 years. He is a tree farmer, but he's a conservationist too, in every sense of the word. He knows ecosystems, endangered species, erosion management, and how to give back to the community. The 2021 Tree Farmer of the Year, next time on Farm Week. Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. See you next week. Thanks for watching.